Welcome to AstroFic, your dose of fun, relatable astrology content where we apply astrology to fictional characters to find out why they're like that. I'm your host, Celeste V, and this week is the finale of Season 2 of AstroFic. And we're going to be talking about Primrose Everdeen as the final character in our Hunger Games series. Isn't that just delightful? I know it has been several weeks since I have last posted an episode, and I'm sincerely sorry. But I don't know if you've been plugged in to the news at all, but shit got crazy here in America. It's low-key been crazy. Not low-key, high-key. It's high-key been crazy for a long time, but it got really crazy in the last few weeks, and that's kind of just been taking over all of my brain space, and I could not even begin to fathom making an episode, let alone an episode like this about Prim, because I think that Prim is very pertinent to some of the things that we are discussing as a country right now. So that's where I've been, and I don't quite want to talk about it much more than that, so let's move on to the ep. Starting with Prim's big three. She has her sun in Pisces, her moon in Aquarius, and as always, where we will begin our episode, she has her rising in Virgo. I just love a mercurial person, okay? And Mercury rulership points to cerebral jobs, like being a healing person, being a medic. Also, Virgo is literally like the maiden. Some people not translate it, but some people refer to it as the virgin, but I like referring to it as the maiden. And I think that this is kind of just to me, it's just kind of playing into a little bit of her name being Prim. She's very prim and proper, like a Virgo. It's very peak Virgo energy. And I just think that it's a funny place to put her rising sign. And it's just kind of a surface level placement that I think is cute and fits. In, like, I feel like in reality we don't actually see a lot of Prim, because a lot of the books are Katniss being away from Prim and trying to get back to her. Like, that's the whole thing. But what we do see of her is very much Virgo. It's this kind of like perfect daughter energy. And I stan. So let's see, that's her first house, Virgo. Second house, Libra, where she has no placements, but she does have placements in the third house. The Scorpio, she has just Saturn here. Listen, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Saturn is all about restrictions, and the third house is siblings. I think Saturn points to the restriction and isolation that happens between Prim and Katniss after their dad dies, and especially after Prim is reaped and Katniss volunteers. But like also in like a bigger sense of the world, now that we know so much more of the world after Sunrise and Reaping, their dad dying, Saturn can be representative of authority, father figures. Their dad dying cut them off from the culture that they were supposed to inherit. He was the last living relative that knew of that culture. Like Haymitch and Astrid, their mom, know about the Covey and know about the culture, but that's not necessarily their place because they're not Covey. They married into it, you know. I also think that in this placement, this isolation is prompted by grief, represented here by Scorpio, and it paints their entire lives growing up. Something about a fixed sign I feel like can really embody an entire sector of life. Like a fixed sign has no problem engulfing something in its energy, and that can be, you know, fun and flirty if it's Leo, but when it's Scorpio, it's very dark and mysterious and sometimes scary. I think also Saturn being in this house, in the third house, can point to the fact that she never got to grow up. And I kind of made this as a parallel to the Saturn placement that Maceley has. But for Maceley, it's farther in her chart because Maceley was older than Prim when she died. Not by much, but she was older. Prim died when she was like 14. Maceley died when she was like 16. But I think at 14, you've just barely gotten a handle on like what you and your inner world may be like and what you may want your life to look like. Not a definite, but just you're just barely starting to like have those ideas and think of those things. Maceley was a little bit farther along in that process. So yeah, we're starting off real strong with kind of a vapid rising sign and then like the saddest Saturn placement ever. Okay, so she has her 4th house in Sagittarius. She has one placement here, which is Mars. I just think that a Sagittarius Mars can explain her positive outlook most of the time, especially what we see with her last interaction with Katniss before she left for the first games. She doesn't just say Katniss can win out of a place of wanting to make herself feel better. Prim genuinely believes this to be true. I think she would have been one of the 2 girls to pursue the truth regarding their parents. Katniss would never dig deep to figure out that they're Covey. Prim would have done that, you know what I mean? She also had a better relationship with her mom and kind of worked as a bridge between her and Katniss, the 4th house being representative of the home, of maternal energy, of the mother, and Mars here being Prim taking action in terms of becoming that bridge between her and Katniss. And it's also because of this role that I think she would have had an easier time getting this kind of information about their family past from Astrid. Ultimately, this placement is interested in pursuing the truth around their family and their home life. I think that she was able to accomplish some of this in the interims where Katniss wasn't around, especially late Catching Fire and into Mockingjay. Can you guys hear that? There's a huge, oh my god! There's a huge dirt lot behind my apartment complex. I'm gonna fucking lose it. And it goes into the mountains, and people will go up there and ride their ATVs and their dirt bikes and be super loud and obnoxious and annoying. People at night will go up there with their trucks and their cars and do donuts. It's so pisses me off, man. Don't they know I'm trying to record a podcast here that I should have recorded weeks ago? Anyways, I think Prim is interested in discovering the truth of their family, and I think that she's able to accomplish some of this in the interims when Katniss isn't around. I have to figure out if you can hear this. I have to stop the recording. So the bad news is that you can absolutely hear it, and I'm terribly sorry, but I'm not editing that out. I don't know. And now I'm going to make all of you guys hear it in the background, because you can hear it in the background. The guy is gone now. Thank fucking God. Anyways, before I was so rudely interrupted, Prim is searching for the truth of their family. It's a shame that she didn't live long enough to see this out, but that is what war does. Prim, I think, definitely had knowledge of some of their family history and some of their family past that she never got to tell Katniss, because they were actively in a war, because Katniss was in and out of the hospital, because Katniss was in and out of war missions and meetings and tribunals. That's not right. I don't know why I said that. I'm terribly sorry. Anyways, they never really get a chance to talk about this. And you know what? I'll wait until we get to Mercury to talk about why she might not have talked about this with Katniss. So let's just move on. Her 5th house would be in Capricorn. Is it only the one? It looks like it might only be the one. It's just the one placement. So she has an outer planet here, Uranus and Capricorn in the 5th house. She's not very creative like Katniss or Peeta. She's a pretty by the book person, which is why I think medicine worked out for her, because that's kind of a thing that you do by the book. You don't really freestyle shit. And this house points to her romance and future children and family, and in Capricorn, that's very dictated by time. In order to achieve those goals, she needed time. But Uranus adds a random factor that doesn't reveal whether or not she'll even make it that far. Capricorn is an hourglass, and it's still pretty full, but Uranus is a cat threatening to knock it off the table, basically. And as we see, she did not beat that variable of time. She never made it to that threshold, which is so sad and depressing. I didn't say this was going to be a happy chart. So let's go to the 6th house in Aquarius. Let's start with the outer planet that's in here since I'm looking at it. So in the 6th house in Aquarius, she has Neptune. It's easy for her to get lost in that feeling of every day being the same and not having much variety. Neptune, I think, adds this weird, like, groggy, foggy feeling to the day-to-day activities of the 6th house. And in Aquarius, with the help of Neptune, she's capable of seeing like the big picture goal for the daily grind, and the goal is freedom and peace. But sometimes when you can so clearly see the big picture, the minutia gets kind of lost to you. And so I think she kind of operates from this place of like big story beats almost. And this might be because this is what we see of her is from Katniss's point of view. So I think it is a very eldest sibling to look at your younger siblings' lives as like happening in story beats instead of like an everyday thing. You know what I mean? And maybe this placement is less indicative of Prim and more indicative of how we see Prim. You know what I mean? Her only other placement here in the 6th house, just kidding, she has 2 other placements here. Next, Jupiter. Katniss is surprised by the fluidity with which Prim can move through their life and its changes in both District 12 and in 13. But Prim has great insight into what schedule works best for her and the kind of life her family leads as rebel sympathizers. And I think she has a better grasp on the daily events in their community than Katniss does, as well as having a greater insight into what everyone at home is doing, what her mom is doing, what Katniss is doing, what Buttercup is doing, what Gale's doing, what Peeta's doing, what Haymitch is doing once their circle expands that far. And I think she would have lived a very long, healthy life if it weren't for war. With Jupiter here, her daily activities impacted so many more than just her, you know? She ended up becoming a combat medic. That wasn't like, whether she was groomed into that position or not can be argued for days and days, because we don't know, because we only have Katniss's point of view. And let's be honest, as much as she loves Prim, she was so focused on keeping Prim alive that she wasn't involved in Prim's life. It's that thing of like when you have a parent who's a doctor and they spend all day healing sick people, they like come home and they look at their kids and they're like, you're good though, right? Like nothing's wrong with you, you're good, I don't have to worry about you, I don't have to heal you also. It kind of feels like that in Katniss's point of view of like she spends all day long trying to save an entire country, and in like with the intention of like, if I save the whole country, my sister will also be saved. and comes home and is like, I just did all that for you. You're good, right? Like, there's nothing in your day-to-day life that is harming you the way that this war and this civil unrest will. Yeah, it's just, such an interesting placement. Finally, she has her moon in Aquarius also. Maybe people would disagree with this moon placement, but I just think she's too good at compartmentalizing her emotions. She gets really good at putting her emotions aside in order to do important tasks. Just as an example, when Gale gets whipped by the peacekeeper and she jumps into action when her mom can't because of her tremors, and this ability to compartmentalize to do important tasks comes from a desire to help people and make their daily lives better, because this is all these placements are occurring in the 6th house. This work gives her purpose. Also, I forgot to say, put a tally on the motherfucking board, because I also have an Aquarius moon, and I know that people think Aquarius is cold. Aquariuses aren't as cold as people think. People are thinking of the detachment that Aquarius engages in. You can be warm and kind while also practicing detachment. You know what I mean? Like, you can be warm and kind while not full open arms embracing every person who walks into the room into your life. You know what I mean? Like, just because somebody doesn't want an acquaintance to become a close friend doesn't mean that they're cold. It just means that they're good at knowing people's place in their lives, and that can prevent a lot of unnecessary drama. So as someone with an Aquarius moon, it's also very possible that she is only releasing the steam off of her emotions when she deems it appropriate. And as I said, Katniss is not around Prim as much as she wants to be, especially in those last few years of Prim's life. Isn't that so fucking sad, you guys? So we don't know what Prim is doing every day. And this can be said for literally every other character I've made an episode about except for Katniss. The only person we know what they're doing every day is Katniss, because it's from Katniss's point of view. So anything I've ever said about the 6th house in any of these characters should be taken with a grain of salt, because we just don't know what their daily lives are like, because we are looking through Katniss's point of view. Okay, moving on. We have finally made it all the way around to her 7th house in Pisces, where so many of her placements live. Nothing in the outer planets though, so we're gonna start with her sun sign. She has her sun in Pisces because I think she's just too sweet and innocent for this world, and that's what a Pisces sun reads to me. I know everybody in the comments is gonna be like, Pisces are evil, they're little water babies, and you're sensitive. Maybe more sensitive than them. Prim's life revolves around her loved ones, and her sense of self is strengthened by the idea of being helpful and being part of the family. Katniss may be the girl on fire, but if Prim grew a little more and developed who she was the way Katniss was able to, I think she would have been like the golden girl or something like that. The sunshine girl. Something more poetic than that. She shines a light on everyone around her and sometimes dims herself to do so, but she has her own shine that people pick up on that's not really the same. Like, something about her is reflective of light, so that the light shines on others, but she has a certain sparkle that makes her iridescent and beautiful to the people who know her and see her for who she is. Now we're going to talk about Mercury. This is her ruling planet, but her Saturn placement in the 3rd house makes this placement quite strained. At her best, she's good at conveying her emotions to those she has long and close relationships with, like Katniss and Gale, maybe, and Peeta. maybe. It's also like a Pisces Mercury to me reads as like somebody's actually quite shy. The fucking dirt bike is back, you guys. I'm so sorry. Anyways, Pisces Mercury, I think, makes her quite shy. I really hate those people who are out there. Truly and genuinely. Please go away. Thank you. And also, this I think would potentially be square her Mars sign. And so she acts as like the bridge between her mom and Katniss, but that doesn't mean that she necessarily likes doing so. And I also think that Pisces Mercuries are not afraid to manipulate the truth. They kind of are similar to Libras in that they can and may very well manipulate the truth in order to keep balance and not hurt people's feelings. I think the latter is more of Pisces' motivation to manipulate truth, while the former is more of Libra's motivation. So I think that sometimes she keeps things from either party in order to not upset them. Kind of like when you get caught sneaking out by a younger sibling and you're like, don't tell mom and we can do XYZ later. And then, you know, your mom makes a comment to them about like, well, if they knew anything about what the older sibling was up to, if they were up to anything bad, they should really let mom know. And, you know, it's kind of putting her between a rock and a hard place. It really sucks, but that's not really the dynamic that Astrid has as a parent with Katniss. Astrid would never be able to tell Katniss what to do ever. So it's a little different than that, but it's still it's strained in a way, you know what I mean? Okay, her last placement in Pisces is her Venus placement, which is exalted. I just know she took up her mom's mantle of healer in order to continue the legacy. War is awful because Prim's chart has so many points, like this house, the 7th house, that could have led to her being a great and shining example of an Everdeen having a wonderful and fulfilling life. Like, it is possible for people of their culture to have a wonderful and fulfilling life. But war made it so that these things could not be fulfilled. Actually, that's why this episode was so hard for me to record, because thinking about Prim makes me think about all of the people around the world experiencing war and experiencing that treachery and not being able to live out the lives that they were intended to live out. Yes, sure, I think maybe a birth chart can point to you living through war times, but a birth chart is much more personal than that to me. And I think that societal circumstances outside of one's control can make it so that a birth chart is never fully fulfilled. And that can be because that person is not brave enough to go against societal norms and standards, or it can be because that person's society does not value their life and will do things like go to war for the interests of what? Rich people? I'm not sure. But so that's why this episode was hard for me to get motivation to record because I just think about other people who are victims of war, just as Primrose Everdeen is. And I just think about how none of them deserve that, and how people do not take the story of Prim as seriously as I think that they should. I truly believe that Haymitch, Katniss, Prim, Astrid, Gale, Effie, and Peeta, this whole main cast of people that we see over and over and over again throughout all 3 books, they are all examples of what war can do to a normal person, to a civilian. And they are all different kinds of warnings. Suzanne Collins wrote The Hunger Games as a response to the Iraq War. Suzanne Collins could have written The Hunger Games as a response to the current war we are attempting to wage on Iran. Suzanne Collins could have written The Hunger Games about the Palestinian genocide. She could have written about anything happening right now, because it's always happening, because it's always been happening, because we live in an imperialist nation state that thinks it deserves all of the world's resources, and when it's exhausted this world, it plans on moving to the next. That is dystopian, and that should unsettle everyone. And I simply don't know what to do about it, except make this podcast and throw in my itty-bitty little messages about anti-war and anti-imperialism and caring for children above all else. Children are the most oppressed class in the world. Argue with your mama about it, because you can't argue with me. Prim has 2 placements left in her birth chart. The 2 really what should be considered the 2 most tragic placements, but her entire chart is tragic because it doesn't get to get played out, you know? And this is how I felt about Maiseli's episode 2. That's why it was so short, because it was just so it didn't get to play out. She didn't get to live. And that's representative of so many like real people, you know what I mean? People, young people who've lived in war zones and didn't make it out. So Prim's last 2 placements. In the 8th house, she has 1 placement in the 8th house of Aries, which is Pluto. Aries is the god of war, and in her 8th house of intimacy, it means that violence will seep into her life, specifically through connection with others. She inherits the consequences of a war she wasn't even alive for, as everybody we've read about has, and she pays the ultimate price for it. She loses her father young. She loses her mother in a way because of losing her father. She loses her sister to the games, and then to PTSD, and then to war, and then she loses her own life in the war after pursuing her sister and only protector is dead. That's what happens to Prim. The only sense of control she has is the idea that she can be a medic and that she can maybe help people who have been hurt in this war, because she lost so many people in it already. Pluto doesn't fuck around. Her 9th house would be in Taurus. She does not have any placements there. Her 10th house would be in Gemini. She does not have any placements there. Her 11th house is in Cancer, where she has Chiron, the wounded healer asteroid. The 11th house is the house of like social connections and friends and society, and Chiron points to a wound. And to me, I feel that this is kind of a Scarlet Letter vibe, having Chiron here in the 11th house. And I think that this is really visually seen when we watch everyone back away from her after her name is called in the reaping. And then she's saved by Katniss volunteering. She has to have hope Katniss will win, or else this is all for nothing, because Prim doesn't feel super useful to anyone. All she has to offer at that moment is her love. Very Cancer thing, right? Ultimately, I think that this was a push towards becoming a medic than it was a hindrance. She wants to take care of people and prove that she brings merit to the community. She does not want to be seen as a girl who should have gone into the games and died. I mean, she does die anyways, doesn't she? It's terribly sad. It's terribly tragic. And I just don't know why I don't know how anybody could read these books or watch these movies and not realize that the country they live in is the capital and everywhere else in the world are the districts. You know what I mean? So I guess, terribly sorry to end this season on a rather depressing note, but The Hunger Games isn't a happy-go-lucky book series, so that's how I feel about that. And I think it's very important that we end with Prim, who is one of the biggest victims of circumstance of all. I could plug things. I don't really want to. Look up people over papers and document when you see ice in your area. Run them out of your towns if possible. Get in contact with your local immigrant rights groups. Bother the fuck out of your state senators and your representative in the House of Representatives, and make sure they know that you want them to not do any of the things that Republicans want to do. You want them to vote against all of those things, and that you want them to vote on articles of impeachment against the felon in office. Yeah, and I will say, you should also, like, when you're bothering them, make sure to do it in multiple forms of contact. Flood their emails, flood their actual mailboxes, flood their voicemails. I've spent months calling and not receiving any answer. Like, nobody would answer. And then in the past few weeks, there were actually interns in the office, and it kind of freaked me out. Don't get freaked out. All they have to do is listen to you, and then they go, I'll make sure to pass your comments along. Thank you for calling. Have a good day. And then that's it. That's literally it. Try not to yell at them, though, because they are interns and they're not getting paid usually, especially if you have a Republican representative. They're almost certainly not getting paid. So yeah, if you very, very specifically, for any Arizona listeners out there, if you live in Arizona's 9th congressional district, I really need you to go to StrabinskyForCongress.com and sign her petition to run. We need to start supporting grassroots politicians, or nothing is going to change. Because you know what a grassroots politician can help us do? Can help us get to a constitutional convention. Can help us restart the whole fucking thing. So we've got to be on that, you guys. So those are my plugs. Just get involved, get active, and stay safe. You've been listening to AstroFic, your favorite astrology podcast, hosted by me, Celeste V. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please don't forget to leave a rating and review. If you're one of our new YouTube listeners, please leave a like and a comment. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Love you. Bye.